Hello, this is Noreen Crone-Findlay from Crone-Findlay.com and toddytalkscrafts.com. Today I'm going to cut this shirt into strips. Why would I do that? Well, one, because it's very eco-friendly to take a worn-out shirt and cut it up into strips so that you can weave with it. But two, there's a more important reason, and that is because this shirt belonged to someone who just passed on, and I am taking two of his shirts and weaving kitty cats using my potholder loom and the whimsical kitty pattern that's on my Etsy shop, so that his beloved wife and daughter and grandbaby all will have a little something of his to hold in their hands, to cuddle and hug. So this shirt is going to become part of a memory, and I'm doing that by cutting up into strips. I already did that with the other shirt, and so here's the some of that yarn left from the first shirt, and I'm using potholder looms to weave the whimsical kitties, and the pattern for the whimsical kitties is in my Etsy shop, so I'll give you the link for that later. So cutting fabric strips from a shirt, there's specific things that you do to make it a very to get the most yardage out of your shirt. And I start by, I'm going to snip away the front band, and I'm going to save the front bands in case I use them as because they have the buttons on them. I'm going to use them to possibly trim, make collars for the kitties. In fact, yes, I think I'm definitely going to do that. So you snip away the front bands, and then the collar. So I'll finish snipping the front band here, and I'll turn off the camera and start the camera on fast forward so that I can show you. I will cut the collar off as well, and I'm going to snip the cuffs and the cuff placket off, and I'll do that in fast forward. And oh, and the pockets too. I'll snip the pockets off as well, and then I'll come back and show you the next step in, and then that in regular speed. Okay, see you in a second. I'm going to speed her up now. Now I'm going to cut the shoulder seam open, on both sides, and now I'll cut around the armhole to free the sleeve. And the sleeves I cut in bias strips, whereas the body of the shirt I cut vaguely on the grain. Okay, let's close to being there. All right, I will cut the second sleeve off and then come back and show you how I cut the bias strips from the sleeves. So I start the snip at the cap of the sleeve, and I just come in at an angle. And my strips are going to be, I'm going to move down a bit closer just so you can see a little better what I'm doing. Okay, so my strips are going to be about 1/2 inch or 1 centimeter wide, and then I'm going to test to see if this fabric will maintain being cut on the bias, and it will. I once cut an entire blouse up with, oh, it's the most gorgeous fabric, and then I had cut all of the strips on the bias and didn't test to make sure that it could sustain itself on the bias, and the whole thing pulled apart. It was like, oh no! So test your fabric to make sure it'll sustain itself. And so I just keep cutting in circles, and what I do is I put my hand, I pull the sleeve onto my hand, and I just keep cutting. These vaguely, I'm going to test that again. Yep, it's stable. Dimensionally stable. That's nice. Okay, so I'm going to keep cutting these strips. Now you can, as well as weaving with these strips, you can also spool knit them or crochet them or knit them, but I love weaving with them, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Okay, and then every once in a while I'll just give the sleeve a bit of a tug to move it along on my hand. My hand is the pivot point. I find doing it in mid-air works best, since I'm going in a slightly eccentric pattern here. Okay, I'm going to continue snipping, and I'm going to snip both sleeves up, and then I'll end up with a lovely pile of fabric strips that will actually be quite beautiful for weaving. Fabric strips full of love and memory. Okay, I'll come back when I have gone further down towards this part here where we're going to have to do a different approach. Maybe what I'll do is I will do I'll do the rest of the bias cuts in fast forward. When I was cutting along the cap of the sleeve, it got pretty steep, and so I wanted to tone that down. So what I do as I go towards the cap is I cut my strip just a little bit wider where the cap is, just to take that curve down a little, and then I go back to my desired thickness. Now you can make your strips of fabric while you're cutting them as thick or thin or wide or narrow as you feel that would work best for whatever loom you're using. Now I know some people cut up clothing for weaving on the peg loom, and that works great, and some use twining looms as well, and that works great too. So you'll want for peg looms, you definitely want a wider strip, depending on your, well, again, depending on your on the set of your loom. So cut your coat to suit your cloth or suit your loom. Now, look what I'm going to do here. I'm going to cut that away, and I now have a flat piece with my strip coming off of it. So I'm going to just start cutting strips along until I come to the other edge. And I've made this a bit wider because I want to bring this more in towards the grain. Now I'm going to cut up to about, that's about 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch from this end, and then I'm going to cut along beside it for my next section of the strip. Now I'm going to snip that extra bit off there. I'll trim that little point away, and then I'll turn again and snip up to about 1/2 inch, turn, now the areas where you make that snip and turn are often really good places when you want to end some of the weaving. You just go whoop, and you pull, and it pulls away. But if you don't want it to end, you need to be a little bit more gentle and support that point in the fabric. So this is how I take the snipped strip right down to the cuff edge. And so there is very little waste this way. We're almost there, and what I'll do then is I will then just wind this into a ball and do the same with the second sleeve, and there we have it. Perfect. So I'm going to go cut the second sleeve up, and then we'll start on the body of the shirt. For the body of the shirt, I'm going to start by snipping away the lining of the yoke section at the back. I'll just snip along. Whoops, shouldn't, oh well. Okay, I just realized, wait a minute, I just cut through both. Oh well, that's okay. I can still, remember how I did that section down at the cuff? Well, what I'll do is just release this part. Didn't mean to cut that off all the way, but hey, life happens. Okay, we'll cut this off completely. Okay, and I'm going to toss the lining bit, not very nice, so I'll just turf it. So, you know how I did the cuff? Oh, there's a bit of yuck here. I'll trim that off too. Still trimming. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 1/2 inch strips along this yoke section, just like I did on the cuff of the sleeve, and then leave 1/2 inch here, turn the piece over, and cut the next strip. Stop 1/2 inch from the end, turn it over, and keep cutting. So that's how I'll deal with the yoke. Now, for the shirt itself, basically, I'm going to be doing exactly the same thing that I just did on the yoke. I'm going to start at down here at the shirt tail. It's the center front where I'm starting. And I just keep snipping up and then flip the whole thing over. Now I have some yoke sections that I can cut free, and then I will be able to make them into fabric too. I mean, they are already fabric. I can make them into strips for weaving. So I will release the yokes here. So you can see that I'm cutting away the seam there. You can see that this is a very eco-friendly thing to do, because you end up saving virtually the entire shirt. Yeah, I'm going to want to clean up the laundered Kleenex. Blah. Nothing quite like old tissue felt. Charming. At least it's clean. Okay, and there you have it. I just will keep cutting from one edge, and you can see, of course, my edge is going to move here, but I'll just keep cutting from the top to the bottom, making the fabric strips, and remembering to stop before I reach the other edge. Now, if you prefer using a cutting wheel, go for it. With this, I find there's so many little jogs and detours that scissors work great. So I stick with the scissors. But that's just my choice. You know, that's the thing in the fiber arts. It's all a matter of personal preference and really personal opinion. So I'm going to keep on snipping here until I end up with some lovely balls of fabric yarn. As I'm snipping, it gives you a chance to really think about things, and so I'm sending the entire family love and hugs. I'm also thinking I might knit a little bear now with some of this. Okay, I am going to see how the neck edge makes a big point there. I'm going to snip that off so you don't have the extra bulk. The places where where I snipped off the seam, I could take a seam ripper and go back and trim off the extra fabric. But sometimes, yeah, especially in weaving, that doesn't really make a big amount of difference. In knitting it might, a bit more so. Now, if you don't care for bears and cats and things, I have a pattern for a spool knitted heart on my Etsy shop, and that can also be just knitted as well. So I think a heart would be a lovely thing to do as some memory knitting, to use the fabric strips from a shirt that was well loved by someone you love. Okay, I will turn off the camera and just keep snipping and come back when I have finished snipping up this shirt and rolling it all into a ball. See you soon. So the second shirt is now reduced to, or transformed to, a bunch of little balls of fabric yarn and some offcuts from the pockets and collar and bits and pieces like that. And also I cut the seams off of this one so that it just makes it that much faster and better to weave them if you don't have the bulky seams on them. And so I did that as I was cutting it out. With this shirt, I ended up snipping each seam separately, but the greener one, I've done that all. And so now to get weaving and knitting. This one knitted, these two woven. Patterns for both are on my Etsy shop. The teddy bear is the Flora and Findlay bear, and these are the whimsical cats. So now I need to get weaving again with these balls of fabric yarn. So there we go. I've woven now two of the recumbent lying down kitties using the fabric strips that I cut from the shirts, and a sitting up kitty, although right now it's lying down too, but sitting up kitty, and knitted a little teddy bear. So cutting up fabric strips is just a wonderful way to upcycle old garments that either have been grown out of or aren't going to be worn again for whatever reason. In this case, they're because they're going to be part of a compassion weaving, and very heartfelt weaving indeed. The fabric strips weave beautifully on the potholder loom, and so I highly recommend it. So happy weaving, go gently, be well, talk to you soon.